Kamala.
Hello. Hi.
This is Kamala Harris.
I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. Go.
We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
The incumbent vice president of the U.S. and the Democratic presidential nominee, Harris has navigated a political career filled with opportunism and contradictions. As Joe Biden's deputy, her stance on Israel mirrors his. She has been complicit in his administration's support for Israel's ongoing genocidal war in Palestine's Gaza that has resulted in the killing of over 40,000 Palestinians. However, as she begins her election campaign, her feet are in two boats, aligning with Israel while trying to curry favor with young Americans who oppose Tel Aviv's brutal onslaught. The presidential hopeful's double standards were on full display when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a wanted war criminal, visited the White House. Harris upheld Israel's right to protect itself, a phrase straight out of Biden's playbook and a rhetoric often used by Tel Aviv to justify its brutal military actions, while simultaneously calling for a ceasefire in the besieged enclave. So, does this approach signal a major shift in the U.S.'s policy towards Gaza? Well, not really. Experts say that Harris has hardly championed any significant measures against Israel and has failed to acknowledge the role played by the U.S. in exacerbating the suffering of Palestinians.
She has outwardly said how much she supports Israel's right to self-defense and even spread the lies of October 7th, the mass rape hoax, Hamas killing indiscriminately 1,200 people, when they know that the Hannibal Directive was in effect. Kamala Harris doesn't change the outcomes for Palestinians in Gaza.
A survey by Harvard Youth Poll reveals that younger Americans support a permanent ceasefire in Gaza by a 5-to-1 margin. So, when pro-Palestine protests broke across campuses in the U.S., the stage was set for Harris to woo young voters, many of whom have been alienated by Biden's approach to Israel's war on the besieged Palestinian enclave.
They are showing exactly what human emotions should be as a response to Gaza. I condemn any individuals associating with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas.
Critics argue that this wavering stance, expressing superficial sympathy with thousands of student protesters in one breath, and simultaneously condemning them and insinuating that they are associated with a terrorist organization in the next, rings hollow in the ears of young voters. Remember this clip from 2017?
Good morning, AIPAC. Good morning. What an honor.
Harris has been a staunch supporter of Israel, describing the state as central to who she is. Reports suggest that since 2017, she has received over $5 million in funding from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, the influential pro-Israeli lobby that was founded in 1963 to maintain a firm pro-Israel grip on U.S. Congress.
She is literally the second or third biggest recipient from AIPAC finances after the president himself.
Shortly after becoming a senator in 2017, she condemned a United Nations Security Council resolution that denounced illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. That same year, she claimed at an AIPAC event to have volunteered for the Jewish National Fund, JNF, a nonprofit founded in 1901 and widely criticized for supporting military and settlement projects in the occupied Palestinian territories.
I fondly remember those Jewish National Fund boxes that we would use to collect donations to plant trees for Israel. Years later, when I visited Israel for the first time, I saw the fruits of that effort and the Israeli ingenuity that has truly made a desert bloom.
Harris's tone-deaf comments neglect the cost of this blooming desert. Thousands of Palestinians killed and millions displaced since 1948, when the State of Israel was violently established. She has also opposed the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions (BDS) movement, which seeks to pressure Israel to end its illegal occupation of Palestine. Harris claims that BDS aims to isolate the so-called only democracy in the region. However, in a recent historic ruling, the International Court of Justice, ICJ, found this only democracy in the region to be responsible for apartheid against Palestinians. Harris's political contradictions extend beyond her support for Israel. Her murky record as District Attorney of San Francisco and then Public Prosecutor for the state of California complicates her progressive facade and makes it difficult for many progressive Americans to take her seriously. Harris has been accused of consistently being silent and not pursuing a significant investigation into the Catholic Church's abuse scandal that was initiated by her predecessor, Terrence Hallinan.
Participation in going after clergy or predators of the Catholic Church or bishops who had enabled these people was less than zero.
Her office also pursued Jamal Truelove on a murder charge in 2008 that an appeals court later overturned. The case cost the city millions in compensation and 6 years of Truelove's life.
She showed up at the two most pivotal times in this first trial, and me being convicted and me being sentenced. She wanted to be present for a celebration of a conviction.
That's what it felt like, celebration?
A celebration, that's what it felt like.
Truelove is still waiting for an apology.
So we are putting parents on notice.
She also supported state legislation that sought to criminally prosecute parents of children who skipped elementary school. The legislation disproportionately affected low-income Black people. For years, Harris also undermined a 2011 Supreme Court ruling that required California to reduce overcrowding in prisons, which violated constitutional rights. She refused to release low-risk, nonviolent inmates, instead overseeing 1,900 convictions during her tenure as San Francisco's district attorney. And when she was California's Attorney General, she incarcerated over 2,000 people. A substance she since then has admitted to using, she now supports the legalization and decriminalization of marijuana.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like in
And
college,
I inhale.
In the same interview, she made a stereotypical joke about Jamaicans.
They say you oppose legalizing weed.
That's not true.
I know.
And look, I joke about it, half joking. Half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me?
The joke didn't land well with her father, Donald J. Harris, who criticized the comment, calling it a fraudulent stereotype used in her pursuit of identity politics. Harris also declined to support bills in 2015 that would have mandated police officers wear body cameras and required the Attorney General's office to investigate police shootings. Critics argue that overall, Harris's actions as a prosecutor often prioritize legal technicalities over justice. According to the polls, Harris has a favorability rating of 46%, maintaining a lead over former President Donald Trump, who is trailing at 43%. However, critics say that as the campaign progresses, Harris's path to the White House may not be easy. From a progressive prosecutor who enabled mass incarceration in California to a vice president supporting policies that resulted in the deaths of thousands of Palestinians, her past actions are likely to come under greater scrutiny. And many predict that the U.S.-sponsored oppression against Palestinians will continue, regardless of who runs Washington's war machine.
For the majority of Palestinians, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Democrat Party in its entirety is responsible for what is happening to them in Gaza. And it's no surprise that he feels comfortable handing the reins over to her as she takes a go at Trump.